Hello and welcome to the Journeys with PDA Coffee Chat podcast, where we seek community connection and co-regulation while chatting about all things PDA. Hello and welcome to Journeys with PDA Coffee Chat podcast. I'm Heather.
And I'm Kerissa. And today we have a really exciting special guest with us. We're so excited because we love getting input from other perspectives and other people. And you have a wonderful book. And so today we have Robin Goebel. Robin, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself?
Thank you so much for having me. This is a privilege and an honor to get to meet both of you, but also to, be shared with your audience. I'm really, really excited to see how the conversation unfolds, especially based on the conversation we had before we hit record. So I am a former therapist and particularly a play therapist. I started my career really wanting to work with kids with, back then we would have said reactive attachment disorder. I was entering the field really right at the cusp of how we were kind of shifting away from that kind of terminology and moving over towards complex trauma, recognizing that these kids had really serious, not just trauma, but attachment, relational developmental trauma. And lived and worked in Austin, Texas for 15 years, saw kids and families, and started teaching and training pretty early in my career. I really love to teach and train, but also there was nobody to send these kids to if I couldn't see them. And so I just was real motivated to take what I had a lot of privilege to be able to learn because of how my life was set up, and start teaching and training. And then about 5 years ago, I closed my practice in Austin and we picked up and we moved to Michigan, which is where I grew up. And I thought I would probably start another clinical practice and keep working with these kids and their families. But we moved right before COVID hit. And when COVID happened, starting a new practice with kids was just not going to happen. And I was in this role of supporting professionals anyway. Like I was doing a lot of professional consultation, a lot of support, lots of teaching, lots of training. And the professionals, of course, really needed support during that time, and they continue to. So I really just kind of stayed in that role of supporting the professionals and the exceptionally hard work that they do, and then supporting parents of kids with, and the language we now use and the parents I work with kind of helped me come up with some of this, big baffling behaviors and vulnerable nervous systems. I was getting a lot of feedback from folks with kids who don't have a history of trauma, and sometimes worried inquiries like, oh my gosh, it sounds like you're talking about my kid, but I don't think they've had trauma. Do you think they've had trauma? And so although I do have a big, big heart for parents of kids who have experienced complex trauma, and I really want those folks to know that I adore them and I spend my whole life being really devoted to them, I decided I wanted to just expand kind of what I was talking about just a little bit, because other folks were coming to me and saying, oh my gosh, this fits my kid too. So that's kind of where that shift happened, even away from talking so much about trauma. It's like, it doesn't really matter what the cause is.
Sure.
Trauma's one cause.
Sure.
There's other nervous system vulnerabilities and disabilities that cause these really big, baffling behaviors.
Sure. I've got a question right off the bat for you. What percentage would you say of the kids who you have supported and who have had, these big baffling behaviors have been actually diagnosed as neurodivergent in some type, like autistic or ADHD, or, what percentage would you kind of throw out there?
I think that depends on what you want to put under the neurodivergent category,
Mm-hmm.
because in my opinion, and I know I'm not the only one, having a nervous system that's been impacted by complex developmental trauma falls under the neurodivergent category.
Mm-hmm.
So if we pull that, population in, I would honestly say like 100%. Because that's how I started. And then because of starting that way, and I really was 100% those kids, I kind of got this reputation for, she can work with kids. I mean, honestly, she can work with kids nobody else wants to work with.
Mm-hmm.
And so then I was getting kids who didn't necessarily have this overt history of trauma, but, maybe they were exceptionally gifted or had, a sensory processing disorder, or they had something else going on that was leaving all the adults, overwhelmed, confused. They had no idea what was going on. Yeah.
So, it's really interesting when we're talking about you have these big behaviors and it's coming from sort of a trauma. And then so that was sort of where we were when we were trying to figure out what was going on with my daughter. And they kept asking, has there been some kind of big trauma? And because they were saying the behaviors you see are a result of very serious trauma. And I was like, no. And I did that too. I panicked. I was like, did something happen that I'm not aware of? Because we were like, no. So turns out that in our situation, being 10 years old, undiagnosed, autistic, no supports, and having the PDA profile, she was living in trauma. And so that's sort of, I guess, like our big tie in how you kind of support the PDA world, is because what we're doing is kind of maybe stripping away some of the labels and the names and just really looking at, these deep inside and these kids and whatever that trauma situation was and whatever the behaviors are, that's how we need to support our kids. And as a parent, it's so hard to even kind of accept that, oh my gosh, like my daughter was going through trauma. She was she was traumatized. In just because we didn't know what was going on.
Yeah, it is traumatic to live, to have a neurodivergent mind and live in a world that's built for neurotypical people. The chronic misattunement, that is nobody's fault. It's just is what it is. And then you add in all the social pieces, the societal stuff, and bigger picture, like cultural ideas about what makes someone good and what makes someone not good, and all of these pieces that it's not traumatic to be neurodivergent, but it's traumatic to be neurodivergent in a world built for neurotypical people with neurotypical ideas and cultural beliefs.
Yes, very much. And there's like that pressure as well that is put onto parents, and we hear this a lot within our community, is the pressure as parents we face to, our kids are expected to behave or interact in a specific way. And here we are, we're trying to change things to like eliminate that like ongoing struggle to support our kids. So I think that Heather had a question and I interrupted. So Heather, did you want to jump in?
No, that's okay.
Oh, okay. So
No. And plus, not only that, but I have forgotten the question since then.
Oh,
So it's good. We're all good.
I'm sorry.
No,
I
it's okay.
I just got so excited because so the like one of the big things that we hear in our community around PDA is that you actually just have a very naughty child, or
Sure.
they're very spoiled. And so
Sure.
if someone were to come to you, or they're going to pick up your book, what is kind of that, like, speak to that piece of where I'm like, everyone says that I have a naughty child, but I think that they're not naughty, but this is what I'm being told based on like our experience. Um, like, how are you going to address that?
Number one, I don't believe in that sort of a label, period. Like naughty isn't a word I would ever use to talk about a child. We're kind of going back to some really big cultural pieces of, believing that people are their behaviors. And that's because of how we're not like me and you were parented, but also just like Western culture, like how we grew up inside systems for cultural reasons that make perfect sense if we look at it. But we grew up inside systems where people were their behaviors. We didn't separate the two, like that we could be a good person who sometimes, or a lot of times, has challenging behaviors. Then we also, of course, have this extra layer of who decided what was a good and a bad behavior, right? And then we have these cultural beliefs of this pretty intense adult child hierarchy that we can get super curious about, like who decided that and why. And there's some obvious pieces of, the differences, of course, between adults and kids when we look at brain development that I'm not saying don't absolutely exist, but adult needs and child needs are, like, there's no difference in whose needs are more valid or more important. But culturally, we definitely bring a lot of these ideas into parenting. And then, of course, we decide people are good parents based on how, quote unquote, good, again, I don't know who defined good, but someone defined it good, their kids behave, which is also odd if you think about it.
Right.
And so those are just a handful of things I'm thinking of off the top of my head that create this, intense complexity and culture of shame for parents.
Yes.
Which kind of all comes back to some adult somewhere was like, I can't control this child well enough. And since I can't control them well enough, we're going to, label them naughty and send them off for behavior, intervention treatment so that I can control, and their behaviors easier for me to deal with. So when parents come to me, either because people have told them their kids are naughty and they're terrible parents, or they believe that themselves because of all of the cultural social messages, I start at square one with them with talking about, like, well, let's talk about what behavior actually really is and what it isn't. And here's what we used to think. It makes a lot of sense that we thought this. This is what I learned when I went to graduate school. Certainly it's what we learned about behavior when we were kids, right? But actually, we know that that's not accurate. And it's not that people who think that are bad, because we're separating people from behavior, even people who are behaving in ways we don't like. Right? So it's not like those people are bad, but they're working with old, outdated, inaccurate information.
Yes.
And so we've got to update that kind of at the very beginning of what behavior even really is. There's no way we can kind of tackle behavior if we don't have some understanding of what behavior really is, right? I mean, it's like when you take your car to the mechanic, you're hoping they know something about cars because they need to understand what's going on before they start trying to fix it.
Sure.
But also, behavior is actually the least interesting part of the equation to me. I'm not terribly interested in changing behavior. And I get that some of the kids I see with serious attachment trauma, they've got behaviors that they legit need to change, right? Like for them to live for them to live free in society and not go to jail. We've got to, try to find a way to get these behaviors to change. But again, I try so hard to not even think about it that way. I'm not thinking about how do I get these behaviors to change. Really want to stay focused on how do I help their nervous system feel better,
Right.
more settled.
Right.
How do I help them be more them?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
What are the accommodations that we can build in to support their nervous system?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
and going back to, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, go. You go, Heather.
Okay. My turn. Now I've forgotten again. This is, oh man. Yeah, it's gone. It's gone.
Okay.
Sorry.
It'll come back.
It will, I
sorry.
hope.
Just interrupt. Just say, hey, I remembered.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, everybody's used to that.
I just I love thinking about oh shoot, now I can't remember. It's just like it's that nervous system piece,
Yeah.
right?
Mhm.
That is that's what's so important. Like that's that root. And that's what we talk about so much is like, well, these are the things or behaviors you're experiencing, but like what is that thing deep down in? And very much about we're not trying to like alter their behaviors necessarily, but we are trying to help them be the most themselves. And I remember when I was like, what's going on with my kids and how can I help them? And when you go into the office and you do the paperwork and they're like, what is your goal of this? And I was like, for my children to be more peaceful within themselves. That's my goal.
Yeah.
That's what I'm looking for. And so
Yeah.
it took a long time to get around to it's not a sticker chart or like if you don't do this thing this number of times, then you get this prize, that it actually had to do with their nervous system. And that really is the key to all of it. So so let's talk about nervous system and how the nervous system is actually that root to all these we'll say unpreferred maybe behaviors that the adult experiences.
Yes. The autonomic nervous system is under really everything. But when we're going to speak about behaviors, the autonomic nervous system, do you want me to go super square zero, like describe the autonomic nervous system?
Oh, I am such a nerdy nerd. I love the nerd stuff. So whatever you want to do, I will. You like pink and glitter with Kerissa? I feel like this is some place where we can bond, you and I, Robin.
Me and you can do the brain.
We can do the nerdy McNerdston stuff.
Okay.
Love it.
Cool.
Okay.
So the autonomic nervous system is a part of our nervous system. This is a serious oversimplification. Okay, so all my neuroscientists listening, rolling your eyes.
I always say I'm not a brainologist.
Exactly.
When I explain these parts, I'm like, I'm not a brainologist, but I have a picture.
I like that.
Here's my pretty picture.
I'm not a brainologist.
Right?
Yes. I'm like, I'm a play therapist. I'm a former play therapist. I'm not doing brain surgery. Like, please, if you're in the audience and you do brain surgery, do not get your understanding of the brain from me. Bad idea. So the autonomic nervous system is responsible for all the automatic things that our body does, all the things that happen without us thinking about them. So heart rate, respiration, temperature control, all that kind of good stuff. And with behaviors, I'm thinking about like energy, arousal, and activation. The autonomic nervous system gives us energy. It pushes the brakes or it pushes the accelerator. Makes us go, 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 or slow down, slow down, slow down. Okay. And again, it's not that simple, but it's enough. So the behavior that we see on the outside is the last part of what begins inside the autonomic nervous system.
Yes.
And especially in kids, and then especially with anybody who has some nervous system vulnerabilities, developmental trauma, whatever it is, we all have way less control over our behaviors than we like to think we do. Every human on the planet has less control over their behaviors than they think they do. We have very little conscious control over our behaviors. There's so much happening so fast. And the brain is responding to anticipated information. Like we are starting to act, starting to behave before what we're responding to even happens. It's like, the lever gets pushed on a behavior and it is real hard to back that off. And I'm not saying it's impossible. And that's part of why we, focus a lot on, brain development and growing our regulatory circuits, because absolutely, as we all get older, we develop stronger brakes, right? It's like, I want to haul off and smack that person, but I have a pretty good brake. And so instead of doing that, I'm going to do any number of other things, like just yell at them or walk away or whatever, right? Because it's not cool to hit people. It's not cool to violate people's physical, personal boundaries without their permission. So the autonomic nervous system is still underneath all of that. We'd like to think it was like about this big conscious control, like I'm a good person, so I didn't hit them. Like, okay, sure, that's fine. But what really is happening is you have a pretty strong brake that's helping you, like slow that accelerator down before that behavioral impulse, before your brain, your brain is sending a message, do the punch. That impulse is fast. And so if we want to not do that, we need a pretty strong brake. Okay. So behavior is so not very, very, very little about conscious control, but I also don't want that to sound hopeless. There's a lot, of course, we can do to strengthen our regulatory circuits and strengthen what I call our owl brain so that we do have a bigger brake and there can be more control and choice over our behavior. But we have to have appropriate expectations for when that's even possible, developmentally speaking, and then uniquely, like nervous system wise speaking. So autonomic nervous system, accelerator, and brakes. And then the other part of what the autonomic nervous system that's involved in that I'm particularly interested in, again, I'm not a neurologist or any other kind of medical doctor, so a lot of the autonomic nervous system I'm not interested in, but I am interested in how the autonomic nervous system, that has this very big complex process that helps it decide if something is safe or not safe. Do I want to go towards that thing? Do I want to back away from that thing? We call it approach avoid. Go towards, back away, safe, not safe. And once this complex process of deciding if something is safe or not safe, the autonomic nervous system responds to that. So if something is safe, the autonomic nervous system you rests and allows for the brakes engage and allows for like safe, social, connected experiences. You have to be safe to be in connection as a mammal. If you're not safe, we don't want to be close to each other. I want to be close to somebody who's not safe, and people don't want to be close to me if I'm not safe, because The most dangerous predator to another human is humans.
Mm.
So when we're not safe, the autonomic nervous system says, oh, well, we need to do something to find safety again. So what's the best choice here? What is my best protective response here to be able to return to safety? Do I get a lot of energy so that I can run or yell or kick or punch, right? Those are things that require a lot of energy. There's a lot of accelerator there in the energy experience combined with not feeling safe. So it's the energy. Also, I don't feel safe. I mean, we can have energy while we feel safe, and then we're playing on the playground at recess, or we're exercising, or we're dancing at a concert, or we're cheering in the football stands, right? That's accelerator, but we're safe and connected. If we're not safe, the accelerator is punching, yelling, biting, running away, acting extra silly in a way that you're like, well, this is not cute, right? Or the nervous system can say, oh my gosh, this is so unsafe that running, fighting, fleeing, that actually is not going to help me return to safety. I can't run fast enough or punch hard enough to find safety again. And so my best bet right now is to collapse and hope that whatever is super dangerous leaves me alone because I've collapsed. So I said a lot of words there. Are we good? Is that making sense?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
That was madly writing notes.
Yes.
Okay.
It's everything that you're talking about, I'm like, oh yes. So even though, you're not talking about my daughter specifically, I can see all of those things that play out in her. And the biggest thing that came to my mind is you're talking about once you see the behavior, stuff has already been ignited. That's the very last bit.
Yeah.
And once you see that, it's so hard to pump the brakes. And so I'm thinking about, like back to the car, that car is going to have to gradually then slow down. And so this is something that we experience a lot. And so we call them meltdowns. So that would be like major activation. You're seeing that I am not safe, so I am going to scream, kick, throw. And so what happens a lot, I think, is that a parent begins to not feel super safe when that's happening, and they want it to come to a dead stop. And,
for sure, of course.
And so what we talk about a lot is, because it's the nervous system, like you're gonna have to ride that out until like their nervous system can bring them back down or pump the brakes, that it's not just like stop. And so it's just like the way that you explained that gives such a great picture of why you can't stop that meltdown, oh, actually you're not unsafe, so please just don't do this anymore. And people, I think that's what they're like, how do I do that?
Yeah, my favorite would be, you're not going to get your sticker if you continue to do this.
Yeah, because they really
do
care.
You want to go to the prize box at the end of the day? You're not going to be able to if you don't stop right now.
Yeah. Or you're going to have to go to bed early. I'm going to take away your iPad time. And so I just love the point that this is about an automatic brain system, and that it can't be shut down in the middle.
Yeah, absolutely. And even, you know, there really is, it isn't an oversimplification to say the brain has the nervous system has two settings, safe or not safe.
Mm-hmm.
And then the not safe side, I talk about it like being the dimmer switch in your kitchen, that like you can be a tiny not safe or a lot not safe. And so you can be on that not safe side, or what I say in protection mode, and have it not look like tantrum, screaming, kicking, and, you know, kind of be totally completely at the end of the pathway. You can be like just kind of not safe, like the amount of light you have in your kitchen overnight, right? The dimmer switch,
Mm-hmm.
it's just not just a little, right? And then we see more mild but still protective based behaviors like ignoring, refusing, being oppositional, being, you know, kind of mouthy or sassy, just uncooperative. Those are still unsafe protection based behaviors that are based in the autonomic nervous system. But without question, it is easier to support that child and help them shift their nervous system back into safety and be able to kind of apply their brakes the less quote unquote unsafe they're experiencing.
Mm-hmm.
And to be clear, I'm not talking about being physically unsafe, right? Like I really understand, you know, the majority or all of your listeners would say, well, my kid is not unsafe. Yeah, absolutely. Safety is much bigger than just physical safety. And there's a relational part to safety, there's an environmental part to safety. But the thing that we overlook the most is that there's an internal experience of safety.
Mm-hmm.
And our nervous system is concerned about all of those places, the relationship, the environment, but also what's happening inside the body. And for a lot of kids, you know, parents will say, there's nothing unsafe here. I can't figure out what the trigger is. This doesn't make any sense. And especially in my work where I have a lot of kids with attachment and relationship trauma. So we do spend a lot of time really working on the attachment relationship piece, right? That's a huge piece that we're working on. There will come a point where I'm like, well, this is weird because the attachment and relationship piece, I mean, pretty solid. Right? Not perfect. Nobody ever is. But, you know, this is pretty solid. And that's where I start to go, there's got to be something else going on. Like we are missing a big piece of the equation here. What is happening in their inner world, you know, that is causing their nervous system to flip into protection mode and maybe stay there? And so that's when I started learning, well, because of some things in my own personal life, like about neuroimmune disorders. And that's also then where, and I am not an expert in the autistic mind and the PDA profile, but a lot of families who come into my community have kids with a PDA profile. And that's how I would start to conceptualize PDA as well, that the cue of danger is the demand, whether it be an internal or external demand. And then that, if it's an external demand, it turns into an internal cue of danger because the nervous system flips into danger mode. And now that's experienced as a cue of danger. And the world is so full of demands. I mean, it's just normal life is full of internal and external demands. And some of them are things we could adjust, but some of them are just life, right? Being human.
Mm-hmm.
But they're so chronic and so constant that that's how we end up with a nervous system that's like totally stuck in protection mode, chronically neuroreceiving danger, you know, having huge reactions to what we would call teeny tiny little problems, but the reaction always matches their inner experience. And then eventually just crashing into total burnout. I call it kind of crashing down the possum pathway. But I know a lot of folks talk about like
that's a great
autistic burnout.
example. I like that.
Yeah.
So I really love how you're talking about like it's their inner experience. And the fact, and this is what we see a lot with PDA, when like the whole family is struggling, there's an external demand, but then it becomes internal. And so then you have the parents saying, yeah, but there's no demand. And it's that now it's become internal. So what are things that are going to help support this child's nervous system?
We have to first, as often as possible, and it's not possible to do this all the time, so don't think that you're failing if you can't do this all the time, but we have to lower the level of stress below their threshold for their stress response system. So the stress response system is this, complicated system in our body that responds to stressors, demands, and stress is not bad. So when a lot of people use the word stress and they assume it's a negative thing, stress isn't bad. And I think probably Dr. Perry would use this word, but don't quote me. We're not friends. I don't actually know Dr. Bruce Perry, but I think Dr. Bruce Perry would say, like, when a neurotypical nervous system experiences stress, that's predictable, moderate, controllable, like it's not too overwhelming. It's like the normal kind of stress that babies experience. That allows their stress response system to grow pretty robustly, right? It's like exercising. If we're wanting to build a muscle, there's kind of a sweet spot of how hard we work that muscle, right? We can't work it too hard or we get hurt, but we can't not work it or the muscle doesn't build. And we do need to help humans develop robust stress response systems because life is stressful and there's no way around that. And again, stress is not even a bad thing. When stress is bad is when it exceeds the capacity of our stress response system. And it does this a lot. And with intensity, and the stress response system doesn't really have the opportunity to rest. It's like, again, when you're exercising or you're building a muscle, you can't like overtrain. The muscles have to rest. And so you kind of look at it like some kids' stress response systems getting overtrained because of the amount of stress they're experiencing. Again, my history tends to come with kids who have experienced complex trauma. The stress that they've experienced in their developmental, first couple years of life is kind of obvious. We can really see how their brain develops in a very stressful environment. Well, when we have a neurodivergent brain with a PDA profile, the stressors are so extreme, right? So significant, combined with the fact that I think, Kerissa, me and you were just getting to know each other, but you said your daughter was 10 before you.
Yes.
Yeah. So a lot of these kids, through nobody's fault, are, their nervous system differences aren't recognized for a long time.
Right.
And so we aren't able then to kind of make the accommodations that would be ideal when their nervous system is really robustly growing, which is when they're, very teeny tiny. So then we end up with bigger kids whose stress response system is just kaput, right? It's been so overactivated without any opportunities to rest, which is really required for growth and strength and development. And so now we've got kids who have what we would objectively say are tiny stressors. Stressors other 10-year-olds can navigate and be bummed about, oh, that sucks, or disappointed or sad or even mad, right? Having a healthy stress response system doesn't mean you're no big deal, no problem at all, right? But a healthy stress response system is well, that's a bummer, or even a much bigger reaction, but we're not totally kind of going bonkers and taking a long time to return to baseline, right? So when we have a really sensitized stress response system, what's happening is we have these kind of objectively speaking tiny little stressors, like it's dinner time, right? And that is, it's stopping. This is what I think is hard for folks to see. Transitions, stressful. Stopping doing something you want to do something that you don't want to do quite as much, stressful. It's stressful for all of us. It's just that I, as a grown-up, have a relatively robust stress response system. And so I can stop doing the thing I want to do to transition to the thing I don't want to do that much, like laundry, right? But they are stressors. And so we've got kids who are having a stressor with a totally burned out stress response system. And they're either going absolutely, bonkers on the accelerator side of things, screaming, hitting, yelling, spitting, energy. Or we've got kids who have totally collapsed into complete, nervous system burnout. So, Heather, I think your question was, what do we do about that? We have to lower the stress. There is no other way. Like if your foot was broken, you're like, how do I run a marathon again? I'm like, well, you have to heal your foot.
We use that analogy all the time.
Yeah.
All the time.
And
the only way you heal your foot is if you stop using it.
Right. And you don't, once you start feeling a little bit better, you don't go out and run on it. You still take care of that foot.
Right. You do still a little bit more.
Yep.
But
because
still
otherwise
a lot of rest.
It's going to send you back and even back further.
Right. And
correct.
We hear a lot, oh, well, they've been taking it easy for 3 weeks. What, like, they should be ready to go. So I love this example because to me, what I'm hearing is it doesn't take 2 days, that it can take a long time of not having those stressors.
Oh, it could take a very long time. And real clear with parents, kind of depending on, by the time I see kids, I don't really know what their baseline is, right? Like I only see them in, intensity.
We understand.
Right.
Yes.
So I don't know what this kid's baseline is, and I really can't predict that, but I kind of prepare parents for the fact that, like, hey, we all have different stress response systems. And some of us have a pretty big wide one and we handle a lot of stress, and some of us don't. And that doesn't make like one person superior to the other or a better human or anything like that. We're all just different. Like some of us have blue eyes, some of us have brown eyes. And people with relatively small, I'll say small, relatively small stress response systems means they don't have a lot of room inside of it. If they have enough privilege in their life, they choose a life of low stress. They have low stress jobs. They don't leave their house very often. Right? And like, not because there's something wrong with them, but because they're self-attuned. And people with sensitive stress response systems can live wonderfully robust, full lives for them. So I'm making parents know from the very beginning, like, hey, we're not doing this so that your kid turns into the kid you're hoping for. I don't know that they're going to. I don't know that they're going to be able to, like, make all A's and go to college, or these things that we've identified as markers of success in parenting. Like, I have no idea. We're all super different. I don't know that your kid's ever going to go back to public school, but I know they're definitely not going to go back if we don't find a way to lower the stress, heal the stress response system, and then slowly, incrementally. And I assure parents of that too. Like, I do want to help your child's stress response system grow. Like, we're not just going to like live under the covers on our iPad eating goldfish for the rest of our lives. Hopefully, that's a hard life to have that little stress tolerance. That really is hard. And that's not judgment against the iPad and goldfish. Like, that's literally a hard life to have that little stress response. So, that little stress, like robustness in your stress response system. So, I really assure them, like, I want to build your child's stress response system too. I'm just not promising you what that's going to look like or how long that's going to take. And I mean, I work with adults in therapy. Like this is a lifelong journey for some people.
Yes.
And that's okay.
Yeah,
Yes.
absolutely. It's that's one of the things that we talk about so often is it is journey. That's why we're Journeys with PDA. It's a journey, and it takes time, and it really goes back to that healing, like you're talking about, healing the foot. So if you're healing your foot, you might have to spend some time completely off that foot. You might have to, sit down for a good amount of time. And that's, I think, hard. That's hard for, I think, parents to recognize. In my situation, personally, in the beginning, I think that giving my child the time to like heal and recover was really challenging. And I wanted it right now because my stress system was like not like, it was worn down. And
for sure.
And so I had to kind of stop and heal me before I could really, really dive into like her nervous system. And luckily for her, when I was like, I think that everybody needs to just stop everything. And so I was trying to heal me, but that was really great. That was great for our whole family. It was like, we got to take everyone's stressors way, way down, before we can even try to like rebuild.
Absolutely. I mean, that is a little slightly ironic piece of all of this, is that adults who want children's behaviors to change right away are adults who have very narrow windows of stress tolerance.
Yes. Yep.
And we want the children to be the ones who change. This is not judgmental. That's how the nervous system works. Like the more stress we get, the further down these protective pathways we go, the less self-awareness and insight we have into ourselves. That is how it goes. It's supposed to go that way. But it is an interesting irony that what ends up is that a lot of folks are asking kids to make changes that the adults can't change, right? Adults often also, and it makes perfect sense. By the time parents get to me, their window of stress tolerance is totally kaput. Of course it is. And we have to find a way to try to work on that and supporting that if we want to help the child's, stress response system grow as well. There's just no way around it.
Okay, so for anyone who is listening and they're like, okay, this sounds great. What are some of those maybe first steps? What are those practical steps that people could maybe start in their life to go? I mean, obviously you have a wonderful book that's gonna, talk all about this, but I do want to make sure that anyone listening, like, they have a little bit of that. What does that look like in your life? What's that practical kind of first step?
Yeah. So this will be obnoxious, and I'm really sorry about that, but really truly the practical, even though it doesn't feel practical, the practical first step is shifting what we believe about the nervous system, because that actually is a way that shifts our stress response, right? That like when we see our kids' behaviors differently, when we see our own behaviors differently, that shifts our stress response and is a practical first step in starting to kind of rebuild our own nervous system. And that also has a huge impact on our kids' nervous system. Seriously, just a paradigm shift is a practical tool. I understand it's probably not stopping difficult behavior in the moment, but honestly, by the time families get to me specifically, they have tried all the this is how you stop bad behavior in the moment strategies, and none of them are working.
Mm-hmm.
And so I usually am just like, so how about we don't start there? Like, it's working. You're a good parent. If they were going to work, they would work by now. Like, I don't have any new magic for you. I promise you're a good enough parent that if that answer existed, you would have found it on the internet before you found me. Promise. So truly, paradigm shift, number one practical thing. And then in the way that I kind of organize the nervous system for folks is the category of regulation, the category of connection, and the category of felt safety. They're not as siloed out as I pretend they are. Like, they all are really related to each other. But I get in there and work with families and look at, like, what is the lowest hanging fruit here that would impact one of those categories. So when I'm thinking about felt safety, I'm thinking about, is there anything that's really obvious to me that we're overlooking that's causing maybe some excessive cues of danger from the inner world? I mean, we get real basic here. Like, does this kid get enough snacks? Do they get too many snacks?
Mm-hmm.
Meaning that's really impacting like the stabilization of their glucose, things like that. Is this kid hydrated? What is this kid's physical body needs, and are they being met? Is this a kid who needs a lot of movement? Is this a kid who needs little movement, but his life is set up in a way that he's being required to like move a lot? Those are kind of my big basics: movement, food, water. And then again, a lot of times by the time some parents come to me and they're like, oh my gosh, this is brilliant. And those tips make a lot of help. And some are like, yeah. This is not our first rodeo. Then I actually am starting to make referrals to people who aren't me who can help them, right? Like maybe I'm making a referral to a trauma-informed neurodivergent affirming neuropsychologist who can maybe help them understand how their kid's brain is working and how they're processing the world. Like sometimes when we can see how our kids are processing the world, that gives us a lot of compassion for them and gives us some ideas about accommodations we could make for them. Like I once worked with a kid who had this super sky high IQ and a very serious reading disability. And those two things put together was causing so much stress in her nervous system. Like, imagine being the smartest kid in your entire elementary school and not being able to read.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So we've got to find these things out. So, is there I have personal experience with the devastation of neuroimmune disorders. And so I'm sending parents down that pathway. Can we explore that? Do we need to get functional medicine involved? Is that even a possibility? There's a lot of barriers to that. So felt safety you can kind of put into 3 buckets. Again, like the inner world, what's going on inside? Is there any low hanging fruit here that if we tended to, we might get some tangible results, either from the child or from the parent feeling like a competent parent because they did something that helps.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And that's another thing that helps, support the nervous system. And then I am looking at like, what's the relational space? Is this little duo, this little dyad here, kid, parent, how misattuned are their experiences with one another? And not because the parent is bad, but because they either maybe haven't been taught how to read their unique child's nervous system, or the parent's nervous system is so burned out themselves that they can't.
Right. Yep.
Right. And so I'm going to look at that. Like, is there a way I can support this to like kind of figuring each other out a little better? And there's a lot of different ways, that I might try to do that. Again, I have a history as a play therapist, so I tend to go that route. Sometimes it's just parent education. Sometimes it's bringing the parent and the kids together and helping them with that messy space of figuring each other out again. Sometimes the relational space means that I've got to tend to the parent first, right? That it's really hard to help regulate a kid's nervous system as a parent is completely burned out, especially if they've gone all the way to like, in my field, people might call it blocked care. Like, this parent doesn't even like this child anymore. It's really hard for kids to get better when their parents don't like them. Mm-hmm. And that's not judgment against parents. I get it. But I got to work on that. Right. And so then I'm going to look for opportunities for like, find ways to have that dyad connect with one another, find ways to, have that parent delight in that child, or I'm going to spend a lot of time delighting in the parent so that they can maybe delight in the child. I'm going to look at structure, routine, predictability. Is it too much or too little? Some people do go too far the other direction. And everything's just like Lord of the Flies free for all because parents don't have enough stress response to create some structure. Some kids need very low structure to feel safe. Some kids need a little, and parents are having a hard time, figuring out what that looks like for this specific child. Sensory things. I'm not an occupational therapist and I don't assess. I have like a little checklist that I'll go through for obvious things and be like, your kid needs some sensory support. And I'll send them for that because they're very commonly go together. So I think if I shortened my answer, I'd say I have to spend a lot of time with families first. I think especially because really, I'm not parents' first rodeo. And probably people listening to your podcast, it's not their first rodeo either. Like, they've tried all the things. So I have to really spend time like getting in there with them and gathering a ton of information. When people are stuck in like a stress cycle, they don't see things clearly. Kids don't, for sure. Parents don't either. And so I try to help bring in kind of a new set of eyes to see things a little more clearly. And then again, I look at what I would just call that, like that lowest hanging fruit. Like what, for some kids, the lowest hanging fruit is food. For some families, that's the I would never touch food or diet or what they're feeding. Never, ever in a million years, because that's just going to cause more stress. So for some families, it's like a really obvious, like, well, maybe let's try this. And they're like, oh, okay. And it helps, It's just so varied. Which is why I love to teach parents about the nervous system. Here's what the nervous system is. Here's how we support it. Take the little information I know about the brain, merge it together with all the things you know about your kid, and then we'll go from there. That didn't really answer your question. No, it's hard to.
Oh, that was just it. That was a perfect answer. It was so great because it was so descriptive. So I have two kids. Both of my kids are autistic. And so some of the things that I have learned in this journey is it sounds like so basic, but it really, really is so important to like kind of pause and look at like, what are they eating and when did they eat? And because they because they kind of can get in that zone and they forgot to eat. And then, that is actually maybe that source of, they are hangry. Like my daughter will get hangry And so it's like, actually, all we need to do right now is get some food in her. So
Yeah.
I've also learned with my son, he cannot remember to drink water. He doesn't. And so
Mm-hmm.
he's dehydrated and doesn't feel good. And so I found we got a big water bottle. If I fill up the water bottle and just like put it near him, he will drink the water and will
Yeah.
feel better. So I know in my family, that is a big piece of it. Even in myself, when I start to feel
Yep.
like I'm super anxious and I'm like, did I drink any water? When did I eat last? And so
Yeah.
that's like that small first step. And then of course that felt safety. Um,
Yeah.
it's so big. And I think that can be a hard concept for people. They're like, everything's safe. It's, it's
They are
fine.
safe.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is like, well, they are physically safe. And then what started happening in kind of like like the attachment field is people started morphing felt safety into meaning relational safety. So as soon as I would talk about felt safety, parents would feel really offended. Like, you're saying that I'm not relationally safe for my child. I'm like, no, 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 no. Like, this is not the right definition of felt safety at all. Like, felt safety is very broad and includes their inner worlds. There's a lot of things. And also, I don't yank anybody into feeling safe. Like, that's no, like, all I can do is make offerings of felt safety, and their nervous system has to receive them. Right. And this is an extra challenge for kids with attachment trauma and kids with PDA profiles because they're a little less resistant to, I mean, it's just another demand. And then for kids with attachment trauma, we can't lean into the connected relationship so much because the connection is actually something that causes more distress. So then we have to just actually, what we have to do first is spend a lot of time grieving
Mm-hmm.
because this is really hard. And we might not ever parent the kid that we were longing to parent ever. And that's sad. And we're not bad parents because we're sad that the kid that we have isn't the kid that we wanted. That's just a normal human thing to have. But when we have kids who have these extra vulnerabilities, like connection feels dangerous or demands feel dangerous, right? And those are the cues of danger. The thing that's, I think, kind of cool about felt safety, I think of it as like almost like a buckets or like a scale. Like, if I know that it's hard to, fill up the bucket of felt safety from the hydration one, because even hydrating feels like a demand, then what other buckets could I fill? What other, can I fill the relational bucket, or what stress can I decrease? Right. So it's like a balancing. Can I fill a bucket of felt safety? Can I decrease a stressor? And then we are going to be much more likely that the nervous system has the capacity to regulate through the demand, like taking a drink. Right. I also am chronically dehydrated. I have water bottles that literally they tell me to drink, and I still just look at them like, and I'm trying so hard because I do feel a lot better, so much better. But I have this thing where I'm like,
Right.
So
that's why I have so many
if we can
bottles.
fill the other buckets. Yeah. So many drink options.
I'm like, maybe if it's this shape, size, color, location, I will feel more like drinking the water. And
maybe.
And if the water bottle happens to be pink and glittery,
that does help.
does it make it? Does it make make it taste better?
Yes. Yes. I think that
Yes.
Yeah, of course, right?
yeah.
What a silly question that was.
Yeah. These are just like this whole conversation has just been so so like enlightening, and it's like filling in these gaps of, okay, like I'm getting this deeper understanding of like what's going on in my life and in our journey, and um it just, everything just makes so much more sense when you're coming back to nervous system, rather than like trying to discipline or correct this behavior. Like that, let's come back to the nervous system. And we talk about a lot felt safety, and it's either safe or not safe. Like, and so always coming back to it's safe, not safe, and it's about the nervous system, and you can't just be like, you are safe, so calm down.
Right. You can't do that. But
No.
there are some things you can do to be very strategic and deliberate about sending more cues of safety to their nervous system.
Mhm.
And then we have to like let go of having any agenda of, do they now feel safe? Because having an agenda is actually not safe.
No, it is not. And
Regretfully.
if they're anything like our PDAers, they can pick up on that
Oh,
agenda
yeah.
and
Absolutely. No, because an agenda comes from a nervous system that's not feeling safe.
yeah.
And one of the things we're really cued into from a neuroception standpoint is that person feeling safe. Because again, humans that are not safe are very dangerous. So we're really cued into the state of the other person's nervous system. And if I want someone to change, and that's different than like, gosh, I really hope that this person can find a way to feel more peaceful in their body. That is not having an agenda. But if in this moment, I'm like, I need you to do something different in this next moment, and I'm going to try to manipulate you into it, that's an agenda. And we experience that as not being safe, unfortunately. I mean, I'm as human as everyone else. I wish that worked.
Right.
I wish I had that power.
Right.
Yes.
This would be so much easier, wouldn't it?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
This has just been such a wonderful conversation. You're so insightful, and so if someone wants to learn more about you or get connected with you, how can they do that?
I'm very easy to find on the internet. So my website's just my name, robingoebel.com. I do have a podcast. It's called The Baffling Behavior Show. And my podcast or my website also has a free resources page that grows pretty regularly. I am really lucky in that I have a business that is financially stable and that lets me do a lot of work for families for free. So I try to keep that free resources page well stocked and well updated. And then my book is Raising Kids with Big Baffling Behaviors, and you can find that anywhere. It's paperback, ebook, and audio.
Awesome.
Fantastic.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, we thank you very, very much for joining us today. And if you are out there and you would like more information about pathological demand avoidance, you can find it at journeyswithpda.com. You can also find us on Facebook. We are on Instagram. And you can email us at journeyswithpda@gmail.com.